Have you ever laughed at something so impossible? It hurt a little. Imagine this. You're nearly 90. Your hair is thin, your steps are slow, your hands tremble when you pour water. The sun feels heavier than it used to, and the days feel longer. And then, out of nowhere, a man tells you you're going to have a baby. Not adopt one, not hold your grandchild, but carry one in your own belly. If that image stirs something deep inside you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Here, we don't rush stories. We let them settle, breathe, and speak to something ancient in you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now lean back, breathe deep, and let the quiet settle in as we begin. You're sitting just inside the tent, where the breeze from the desert barely brushes the edge of your robe. It's dry today, bone dry. The kind of dryness that cracks your lips and burns your throat, even when you're not speaking. The goats are restless. The servants are moving slowly. And Abraham's doing that thing again, standing in the heat, looking toward the horizon, waiting for something or someone. And then it happens. Not a thunder, not a voice from heaven. Just three men, ordinary, dusty men, approach the camp. But something about them makes Abraham bolt into action like a boy again. He runs to greet them, bows low, calls them my lords, and insists they rest, wash, eat. And you're listening from behind the canvas, not by accident. Let's pause a second here, because here's a strange truth not many talk about. In ancient Middle Eastern hospitality culture, it was considered sacred, a divine act to care for strangers. Not just a kindness, a sacred responsibility. That's why Abraham doesn't hesitate. Hosting isn't optional, it's worship. So you begin kneading flour. 3 C's of it, that's over 20 quarts of fine flour. Enough for a feast. You're old, your hands ache, and your back protests, but something about this moment feels larger than weariness. Abraham serves the meal himself, curds, milk, a tender calf, and then stands to the side while the men eat. Then one of them turns and says it. He doesn't speak to Abraham alone. He says it loud enough for you to hear through the tent flap. Where is your wife, Sarah? Your ears perk. He knows your name. He knows where you are. Abraham replies, there, in the tent. And then comes the thunder, not in the sky, but in the sentence that follows. I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Silence. Your hands freeze. The flour on your palms turns cold. And then, you laugh. Not loud, not mocking, but that involuntary, soft kind of laugh when something hits you between disbelief and longing. You've waited so long. You've cried so many nights. Your womb has been a desert longer than this land. And now a promise. You whisper to yourself, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? And that's when it happens again. The man who should not have heard you speaks directly to Abraham. Why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child, now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? Let that echo in you. Is anything too hard for the Lord? You weren't asked for a resume, not a report of your failures, not a list of how old your bones are or how bitter your prayers have become. Just this, a promise. And now, a question. Not from a stranger, but from the one who sees behind canvas and beneath skin. You say nothing. The text says you were afraid. And so you lie. I did not laugh, you say. But the response, yes, you did. And it's not cruel. It's not shameful. It's as if God is saying, I heard the laughter behind the laugh. I know what you're afraid of. And I'm not angry. I'm here. Let that settle in you for a moment. God didn't strike Sarah for laughing. He didn't revoke the promise. He didn't scold her for doubting. He simply repeated the truth. You will have a son. Here's the thing most people skip past. Sarah's laughter wasn't rebellion. It was weariness wearing a smile. It was the chuckle of someone who's seen too much and hoped too long. And God met her there. In that laugh. In that ache. Next time you find yourself smiling bitterly at a dream that feels too far gone, remember Sarah. Not because she was perfect, but because she was human and God kept his word anyway. He still does. Gives when you're ready. Just type continue and I'll share the next part of Sarah's journey when doubt begins to shift into something deeper. Belief. Do you know what's stranger than receiving a miracle? Waiting for it after you've already been promised. You see, sometimes the hardest part of faith is not the moment of the promise, but the space between the promise and the fulfillment. The silence in between. The ordinary days. The months that pass and make you wonder, did I make it up? Did I hear wrong? Was that really God? If you've ever felt that silent ache, consider liking the video and subscribing. Here, we sit with the quiet, because God often speaks loudest in stillness. Let me know in the comments, what's something you're still waiting for? Back to Sarah. Days pass, then weeks, then months. She doesn't tell anyone, but she starts to feel different. A wave of nausea, a moment of dizziness, something she hasn't felt in over half a century. Could it be? No, it's ridiculous. And yet deep down, her body knows. And her soul is caught between two worlds, one that says, "You're foolish. This can't be." And one that whispers, "But what if it's finally true?" Let's pause for another surprising truth. Most people assume Sarah didn't believe, that she was skeptical to the end. But that's not what Scripture teaches. Hebrews 11:11 says something radically beautiful. And by faith even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. Did you catch that? She considered him faithful. That means somewhere between the laughter and the labor pains Sarah shifted. Something inside her moved from doubt to trust. Not trust in herself, not in Abraham, not even in the promise, but in the promise giver. Imagine her, now a few months pregnant. She feels a kick for the first time, not metaphorical, real. A sharp flutter beneath her ribs, a ripple of life from within her. She places her hands on her stomach and gasps. And then, she begins to cry. The tears aren't loud, but they are deep. They come from the dusty wells of her soul that haven't been visited in decades. She speaks softly, "He really sees me." Maybe for years she'd believed she was forgotten, that she'd missed her moment, that God had moved on to younger, more capable women. But now she knows, God is never late. He's not a God of our clocks and calendars. He's a God of perfect timing. Here's something else that's easy to forget. In that time, being barren wasn't just a biological condition. It was social death. A woman without children was often considered cursed or shamed. And Sarah had carried that weight silently for years. But now, her whole identity is changing not by her own strength, but by grace. Let's not rush past that. Because maybe you, too, carry some shame that was never yours to bear. Maybe you've called yourself names God never whispered. Maybe you've accepted a silence that was never heaven's intent. This part of Sarah's story reminds us, God can rewrite the scripts we've lived under for far too long. Month after month, the child grows. Sarah begins to walk differently. Not just because of the weight she carries, but because of the hope she carries. And the household begins to whisper, "She's glowing. She's laughing more. She looks radiant." And she is. But not because everything is easy. She still has questions. Still has fears. Still wonders, will I make it? But now, she knows she's not walking alone. She's walking with a promise. Let me ask you something quietly. What promise are you walking with? What prayer have you tucked so deep inside you don't talk about it anymore? What dream feels so fragile you only visit it in your sleep? Can I remind you, nothing is too hard for the Lord. The next time you feel like you're too old, too late, too tired, too flawed, think of Sarah. She didn't become strong first. She didn't fix everything first. She just began to believe slowly, gently. That maybe, just maybe, God is as faithful as He says He is. And He was. What does laughter sound like when it's been buried for years? Not the kind that fills a room with noise, but the kind that floods a heart with healing. If this kind of deep joy moves you, consider liking the video and subscribing. We walk these ancient roads together, not for information, but for transformation. Tell me in the comments, when was the last time you laughed and knew it came from God? The time comes. Sarah is in labor. She, the woman who once laughed in disbelief, is now groaning in birth. The tent is filled with hurried footsteps, midwives, water, linen. Abraham waits outside, pacing like every father who's ever waited. And then, a cry. Not Sarah's, a baby's. The air changes. The sound of life fills the tent. They place the child in her arms. She stares at him, tiny, fragile, real. She looks up, eyes shining, voice shaking, and says, "God has brought me laughter." And so they name him Isaac, which means he laughs. Here's the beautiful irony. Sarah once laughed in doubt. Now, she laughs in delight. Same mouth, same voice, but a heart renewed. That's what God does. He doesn't shame us for our weak moments. He doesn't withdraw when we laugh in disbelief. Instead, He brings us full circle until the very thing we doubted becomes the very source of our joy. Let's talk legacy. Because this wasn't just about a baby. It was about a nation, a lineage, a promise stretching across millennia. Through Isaac would come Jacob. Through Jacob would come the 12 tribes. And from one of those tribes would come Jesus. Think of that. A moment of laughter in one tent becomes the beginning of salvation for the whole world. All because God keeps His promises. Now, here's a truth we don't often hear. Faith doesn't always look strong. Sometimes it's tired, worn out, fragile. Sometimes faith is just staying in the conversation, staying open, staying hopeful even if your voice trembles when you pray. That was Sarah's faith. She laughed, she doubted, but in the end, she stayed. And because she stayed, you saw. If you've ever wondered, have I waited too long? Did I miss my moment? Is it too late for God to move? This story is for you. Because nothing is too hard for the Lord. Not even your situation. Not even your past. Not even the part of your heart that has stopped hoping. Let's close with one final reflection. Picture Sarah holding baby Isaac under the stars. Abraham stands beside her, arms wrapped around them both. The promise is here. Not in theory, not in prophecy, but in her arms. Breathing, laughing. She leans her head back and gazes at the sky, and maybe, just maybe, she sees one star flicker a little brighter than the rest. And she whispers, "Thank you for not forgetting me." What part of Sarah's story spoke to you the most? Leave a comment below. Your words might be the encouragement someone else is waiting for. And don't forget subscribe so you never miss another promise, another miracle, another story that whispers hope into your soul.